So last week I had brought up the fact that this week's episode was probably going to be the most substantial rearrangements for the adaptation yet. The episode title was a dead giveaway, and while I had some ideas about what they were going to do come this week's episode of Yozakura Family, my expectations were still surpassed in many areas, starting with the chapters that were involved in this episode. So to give you an idea, this week's episode has content from chapter 4, which was given a slight adjustment, as well as chapter 10 with a heap of new additions, as well as chapter 40 being pulled all the way down into this week's episode. Now I know people probably hear chapter 40 and flinch a little bit because you're wondering how much content you may have missed, and I can assure you this is not a bad rearrangement to be of concern. Chapter 40 is the entire chase dealing with Kingo, and that itself is a very standalone chapter. It doesn't contribute to any major plot point, but rather gives Kingo and Tayo some time to really get accustomed to each other, and of course it did not come without some changes alongside that. Now at some point I do want to touch on what was essentially cut or pushed back. Right now it's unclear until we get there, so I'm trying to hold off and wait. But for all things that may be cut, you can expect a post-season finale video touching on everything in the event it does not actually fully get into the anime. Now this week's episode pretty much follows the episode title accordingly, with focusing on Kingo and Shinzo. The weapon master and master of disguises are in one word a handful. Their personalities being polar opposites, yet having their quirks, and I believe that to be a reason why people will come to love each of the family members individually over time. Now as for additions, the beginning of the episode is largely different in comparison to the manga. For starters, this week's episode kicks off with chapter 10, and in that chapter, Kingo wasn't even supposed to be in here, hence the pulling of chapter 40 to include him in. Additionally, Shinzo was already on his mission, and he actually didn't have any of the family interactions that we saw. Again, these additions fill up that groundwork opening these situations have, where we can have these moments that essentially lead up to the actual main plot point. The episode establishes that Shinzo goes on a mission, and then we are departing from him for a bit. So putting him aside, we then pull back a little bit and cover just a brief showcase with Tayo and his new physical feats. Chapter 4 did have more instances of Tayo's newfound acquisition of skills, but the main one was the baseball catch alongside the silent stepping around people. Again, because chapter 4 had pulled the main emotional showcase of the chapter into last week's episode, the scene where Mutsumi talks to him about it also got some slight changes. In the manga, they talked in the hallway before a teacher caught them, which would have been leading to the main point of chapter 4, but since the whole thing is not happening, they moved it to a rooftop lunch date, which still works nonetheless. If anything, this is showing a form of consistency with the fact that the staff are conscious of the ricocheting effects that these changes are having on the adaptation. Between the changes and additions, all the bases are pretty much being covered, and again, you should continue to expect a heap of these. Now from here on out, the anime pretty much follows into chapter 40 all the way through. The documentation issue with Kingo is all canon, and there were anime original scenes with this entire chapter being covered. Before we get to them though, I think you all can see just how much of a troll Kingo is. The best way to describe him is free-spirited, given the obvious attire we saw him in as the situation kicked off, and it is insane to me that the man is so elusive to the point that locking down the entire house is necessary to play hide and seek. It goes to show how hard it is for him to not only be caught, but for anybody to catch him as well. The first half of the episode is pretty much our couple going around the house trying to catch him, and giving Tayo an insight into how the little things in the household can turn into such a monumental thing in the blink of an eye. Kingo even managed to fool them both, as each time the couple visited a sibling's room, it wasn't really them all along. If there's one thing Kingo is gonna do, it's play the part, which is why they were confused when Shion asked them if they were playing hide and seek, yet prior to that they already visited her room, which is also one of the anime original scenes added before he pops out of the painting. You never know when this man might be impersonating somebody else, and I'm glad the anime doesn't do anything to give it away with any indications like a smirk or somewhat, minus that one towards the very end. It shows just how good he is, but not good enough to impersonate Tayo just yet. Now when you are in a relationship, a key thing you tend to focus on is patterns and tendencies, and because Kingo hasn't exactly observed them enough, nor been in a relationship himself, he lacks that awareness of those things, in which Mutsumi takes advantage of. It was a cute moment to point out how Tayo always lets her walk through the door first, and it's those little things that really show how invested they are into each other's character, and overall is something that not even Kingo can recreate perfectly. Now as for some more additions, the scene with the Yozakura's mother and the siblings as little people, that is all anime only. I can assure you, you will come to see what the mother brother looks like in due time, but the content serves its purpose to show that despite his behavior, Kingo is a big brother now. It's a mission that was given to him from his mother, and at that point, who wouldn't concede with that thought in mind? Another change was the exchange with Taiyo and Kingo, as they were the ones who were searching for the documentation. In the manga, Mutsumi was the one that found it, while Taiyo blew up on one of the grenades, but it's clear that the anime is trying to establish as much foundation within Taiyo and the siblings as possible, so the couple's position has switched places. Overall, as far as the Kingo content goes, again, chapter 40 is really episodic, and the fact that they thought that far ahead for this episode should also give manga readers an idea on how far we may go this season, because there is also some major content around the 40 mark, but alas, no spoilers. Now moving along to the Shinzo content. His mission is comprised of chapter 10, with new additions as well, starting with the gadget glasses scene in the vent and Taiyo sneaking in from the outside. Quick praise for the background art, because that was some really nice scenery despite it being extremely quick. Although being a beast when armed, Shinzo is a bit of a scaredy cat without weaponry, continuing that quirky character consistency, which plays into the main content of chapter 10, with Mutsumi sending Taiyo in to go deliver a care package so that they can complete the mission. Now the Taiyo fight scene was all anime only, however, his Yay gun is his signature weapon that made its debut today. Alongside the Yay, the outfit, which is known as the Yozakura loungewear, are actually introduced in chapter 6, but when I had mentioned last week how Shion had provided Shinzo with data, I believe it was because Shinzo used that data to create a gun for Taiyo, which being the Yay. Now I could be wrong, but I believe that to be the case given what we saw this week. Even though the original context has been changed, the main look for Taiyo has pretty much made itself into the anime. Furthermore, while brief, I do appreciate the inclusion of the fight scene given Shinzo primarily did it all on his own in chapter 10. Since it was anime original, I don't mind it being tame, but I really hope that as the show dives into the fights, that it doesn't hesitate to really flex where it needs to. The fights are really solid quality, and I'd hope that the anime can measure up to that. The rest of the episode is pretty much about the brothers completing the mission, and we can see just how sharp Shinzo is when he does have the right equipment with him. I think it'd be pretty cool if the anime adds a lot more fluent original gunfights for his character, given his aptitude for the fighting style, but you can see that whether it's a gun or even a fork, which is absurd all things considered, that anything of a weapon can be used to his advantage. I will say for Shinzo, just like Taiyo, his fighting style will not just be purely firearms. It does evolve with some major development tied to his character, so stay tuned for that. The takeaway from their mission being that Shinzo is a brother who will continue to become dependable. Being able to rise to the occasion even in the worst times can always be seen as a form of growth, and from now into the future, these two will really be able to look out for each other in the field, and thus concluding the episode of developing the brothers. Overall, a very ambitious episode looking at the amount of content adapted, and it seems that the anime is looking to get all the foundation completed before diving deep into the fights. Looking ahead at the next episode preview, I am curious to see how this content comes into play, given chapters 5 through 8 have not made it into the anime at least for now, but all I can do is trust in the vision. With all that being said, another nice episode of Yozakura Family this week. We got some great characterization of the brothers as well as a bit of action, and overall continuing to make its way into some nice areas of content on the horizon. For my manga readers out there, at this point it should be obvious that the one thing you should continue to do is expect the unexpected and tread with an open mind. There's going to be a lot of new things for us on the horizon, but nevertheless I'm still excited. With that, ladies and gentlemen, it's gonna conclude this week's episode review. As always, thanks for watching, and make sure to let me know how you're feeling in the comment section down below. Stay safe out there, and I'll see you all next Sunday for episode 5.